Hey everybody, I'm rjcurrer, and welcome back to Dungeon Express, an ongoing series where we create quickie down and dirty dungeons for when you need an adventure right away. So tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be creating a quickie mystery. And I know those terms don't normally go together because a lot of people consider mysteries to be very difficult to write. I disagree. I think that they are relatively simple to do, but with one caveat. They require something that you have in probably tons of that most folks on the internet when they're doing these sorts of videos don't have, and that's context. Right? Mysteries require a world in which to exist. You need to know some of the rules of that world so that you understand how the pieces can fit together, what sorts of lines of investigation are reasonable or realistic and what aren't. And it's also helpful to have situations and NPCs that you can attach them to and build out of, because that kind of does a lot of the initial legwork for you. So when you're building them from scratch, from a world that doesn't, for a world that doesn't exist yet, or for an unknown sort of world, they can be a little more daunting to build because you don't have that context to start. So to that end, I've done a little more prep work for this than I would normally do for one of these sessions, in that I have spent some time kind of thinking about this world and how things might fit together. And to make this a little smoother, I've created a simple little Forgotten Realms style village that could drop into any sort of campaign setting called Dun Mater. Very simple place, very few little landmarks, sorts of stuff we might find in any kind of village, but important for us to know when we're creating this mystery, because we're going to need these places as investigative locations where we can find clues and that sort of thing. I've also gone through as usual and kind of figured out what sorts of monsters are kind of in the wheelhouse of the characters of this level. And in this case, we're going to be making one that's calibrated for 4 fifth level characters. And so I did a little research and I found that an Oni is kind of the perfect fit as a 1v the group kind of monster for this, which makes for a nice, simple, clean mystery where we've got one baddie that the players have to track down and discover the identity of. And then they can have their duke it out with their final climactic battle without having to pull in a whole lot of other features, making this very streamlined, very simple, and yet still very fun. What we're going to do when we create a mystery is the very first thing is we write down what what the solution is, what happened, who did what to who, when, where, why, that kind of stuff, right? So we're just going to give ourselves a quick little synopsis of that. And so we're going to say that an Oni, underline that so we recognize that, in the disguise of an adventurer is slaying and eating victims in a small town during a fair. And so that is both my concept for this adventure and it is the solution, right? We have an Oni, which has the ability to polymorph itself into a small or medium-sized creature. And while it is normally a fiendish giant, akin to an ogre, if you're not familiar with them, they're in the monster manual. Pretty cool. Check them out. But I have this idea of this Oni that feeds on people, right? And so it's disguised itself as an adventurer, and it travels the roads looking for towns that are currently either having things like a fair that are going on, or some kind of celebration, or market days, something that brings a lot of people, a lot of strangers into town, and kind of using that as a mask. And then they're killing and eating people that live in that town, and then they kind of move on once their cover moves on as well. So like when the fair leaves, they'll leave, and so there's a limited amount of time. So is our this is our solution. This is what happened. This is what the players are going to figure out, and they're going to discover the identity of this Oni. When we are doing mysteries, there are a couple tools that I use that really help me kind of craft these relatively quickly. And that is good solid story structure and then node structure. And so story structure is what we've talked about a lot on this channel, where you have sort of your exposition, right? It's your introduction where you're kind of setting the stage. And then you have an inciting incident. In this case, the first murder would be our inciting incident. Then you have a rising action, and that's our investigation. You have your climax, and that's the big reveal. That's where the characters have figured out who it is and they confront the bad guy. And then you have your falling action and resolution, and that's everything that happens afterwards as you sort of wrap up the mystery. And it's important to keep those in mind, because it's very easy when you're writing these things to leave out the exposition, because you kind of figure, well, we'll tie the characters into it somehow. We'll figure it out. Especially in other kinds of adventure styles like dungeons, where frequently the exposition, the hook, kind of gets short shrift, right? It's something that we think about, but we really don't pay it a lot of attention. A lot of the attention goes into building out the rising action, the climax of the adventure, without worrying too much about everything else. And in things like dungeons, where the hooks can be pretty simple, you can get away with that. I think it's a lot harder to get away with it in a murder mystery, because it's harder to come up with a reason why the characters, one, are involved in this, unless you just go with they're suspects, which you could do. But I think it's more fun sometimes to pull them in different directions. They get hired as private eyes or that kind of thing. But also, exposition is a good place to lay out some baseline information that might help the characters kind of understand the environment they're in. Again, giving them that context that they need to solve the mystery. Not clues per se, just context of the world, giving them something to kind of ground this mystery in. So I like to start with just kind of a couple kind of notes to myself about what the opening scene is going to be like. Like, how are they going to experience the beginning of this adventure? And that could be as simple as, they're somewhere and there's a murder and they're kind of on the scene. But for this, I'm thinking that I want there to be a night at the fair, before the murder happens, right? So I'm going to make a little note to myself, Expo. I'm just going to abbreviate that there for me. And I'm going to say PCs at fair night prior. And then I'm going to kind of bullet out a few things that they might experience, because you'll want to role play this with your PCs. You'll want your characters to play fair games and meet some people and that kind of thing. And so, I spent some time thinking about what might be at this fair when I was doing my initial ideation for this. And I came up with a few things. One, we need some fair games. And that's always fun, because you can do some dice games, some gambling for coin, that kind of thing. Win prizes, that sort of deal. Let your players come up with the kind of games they want to play and what they find. And this is a cool situation to do things like, okay, so you're at the fair, you're standing at the midway. There's a whole line of stalls of different games. Which one catches your attention? And let the characters come up with the ring toss sounds cool to me. I go and do that. Another one goes. I played in an adventure at one point where I was actually a player, and a friend of mine was the DM, where he did this sort of thing, and the one of the players who was playing as a barbarian and in part of the band was like, "Well, there's a battle of the bands going on, and we were going to enter into that," and it just was just sort of an off the cuff thing. So it's a cool way to kind of world build and really kind of pull your characters, pull your players into this. So there should be fair games. I think there's a fortune teller as well. And the cool thing about that in this is that they can either be a total charlatan or they can be a real diviner. They might have actual magic that they can use to tell the future with, which makes them a cool NPC that could maybe help, come in clutch later on if the players get lost. Coming in with psychic predictions of the future, that kind of deal. Um, and then there should be some shows, I think. And I was thinking that there should be, a couple classics, right? Like there should be a strong man. There should be a escape artist. And I think there should be, acrobats probably. I mean, maybe we have clowns. I don't know. That'll depend on how people at your table feel about clowns. But, we have a couple, sort of an evening at the fair that goes on here, and we can kind of lay these things out. And this gives the characters a sense of atmosphere of where they are to ground this mystery in. And so we've just got a couple points for ourselves, and we would role play all this out, like I said. And then, following this, maybe night of, maybe probably the following morning, I think there would be murder of villager found following morning. Cool. And we would say that maybe the carnival folk are suspected, and so the fair manager hires PCs to prove sense. Great. And we'll say that that's at 100 GP each. Right? Cool. So we have our expo, we have our actual quest, our inciting incident, a murder is discovered. And in my mind, I'm picturing a crime scene where, the murder isn't at the fair itself. It's actually in one of the homes of the locals. But, it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. They don't want to blame each other. They want to blame the people that have just come into town. And so it's inside one of the locals' homes. I imagine it's kind of gory. It's a mess, right? The body's kind of mostly eaten since it was actually an oni that did this. And so we're already starting to picture our initial crime scene. And this is where that second structure comes into place. We talked about story structure. Now node structure is what's important here. And node structure is very simple. It's you have your starting your starting scene, your investigative point. This would be our first crime scene here, okay? And then from that, we branch out to 3 lead locations. And those 3 lead locations have clues that lead to each other and also lead towards the solution. Right? So all of these lead outward to each other, and then all lead down to our final solution. And if it helps you to kind of write things out with that particular graphic, you can. I'm going to use some of that arrows to help kind of lead where things go, but it's really just as simple as kind of bullet pointing out the evidence and creating little blocks so that we know what is found where, giving ourselves some DCs as well. So let's start with our crime scene. So let's start. Let's do it in our kind of middle section here. Let's say crime scene 1. Okay. And we're going to say victim murdered in home. Okay, and that's just kind of our summary of what's happened here. And then we'll give ourselves some details. So for one, we're going to say door locked. No forced entry. Actually, I'm sorry. The door needs to be unlocked because the Oni wouldn't have been able to lock it behind him. So unlocked, no forced entry. And let's see here. And then we're going to say that the body was eaten. Body eaten. And this has the benefit of eradicating the use of things like speak with dead. That would allow the players to, or the characters to interview the deceased because, well, the things that it needs to speak with have been eaten. That being said, even if they did, it doesn't necessarily have to reveal a whole lot, right? So there's plenty of reasons why you don't have to nerf any of that magic. The deceased may have never seen what got him, may have been taken from behind and dead before before he saw anything. His body eaten, and I'm going to say bloody, gory. Cool. Now, this is where we can start coming up with maybe our first lead, right? Because one of the questions that occurs to me that the characters might ask is, well, what kind of creature would do this? And they might say, well, do we know? And we could say, well, let's make a medicine check and have them make a medicine check. And we'll say that's a DC 10, right? We'll say something like that. We're going to use round DCs for this. We're going to say things like DC 10, DC 15. Some of these clues are going to be free. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll say something like DC 10, make this one relatively easy. And then we're going to say lead to Green Witch. So I had this idea of this sagey sort of spellcaster who, is not a hag, but has some of that kind of homespun magic-y kind of vibe to her, who lives at the edge of town. And while, the characters make a check and they don't necessarily know what might have done this, that check might reveal that maybe they know someone who might know more about this, who might be able to identify the creature. And so that gives them the lead of, hey, maybe we should go check with the Green Wedge. And that'll be another one of our locations where they'll be able to find other clues. Okay, and then we're going to come up with another one here. And let's say there should be a witness, not necessarily to the crime, but to the aftermath, I'm thinking. Witness, and we'll say that he was drunk. So maybe he's a little less reliable, but somebody who was out drinking all night and saw, we'll say, saw Oni in moonlight. And we're going to say that this one is free, that this person comes freely and gives their information. So that they report this to the characters, maybe even seeks them out if the characters don't go looking for them, so that they have this clue right away. And in my mind, it's kind of dark. They've been drinking. They see a shadowy figure that maybe look like, I don't know, like a dwarf or something. And then it transforms in the shadows to this hulking, ogre-like creature they see in the moonlight. And this drunk either runs or they pass out from fright, that kind of thing. And so they get, so the clue is the transformation, that this is some kind of magical creature that now they can describe when they go see the Green Witch or something like that, or they might be able to identify on their own. But now they know what they're looking for, and that's an important clue. It's important that they know that they're looking for something that can pose as a person, and that they're not looking for something that is just completely inhuman, that couldn't be lurking among them, right? And so again, that's why we're going to give this clue for free here, because we don't want a situation where the characters are chasing their tails looking for things like, I don't know, a wyvern that breaks into buildings or something like that, instead of looking for a something that is posing as a person, but is really something else. So then I'm thinking, this is a bloody mess. There's probably a blood trail. So let's see that there's a blood trail, and it's, Oni's a thinking creature, so it probably took some means to try to obscure that, but let's say that it didn't do it perfectly. And so there's a blood trail, and we'll say that it was faint, and so we'll say that finding it is a DC 15, and it lead to the inn. The blood trail goes to the inn where the Oni posing as an adventurer is staying. And so it doesn't perhaps lead to the room, because maybe the Oni probably would have noticed that, would have made great pains so it doesn't go to their particular room. But leading from the house of the victim to the inn tells the characters that there's some, there's people here worth talking to. There's something worth finding here. And then last but not least, I think that we need some sign that our victim was at the fair. So we'll say fair ticket stub. And that is a lead. I'm going to say that's free. And then that's a lead to fair. Cool. All right, and so that gives us our first node, our first crime scene, and some clues that we can work with here. And again, I'm not worrying about really shaping out all of how this is all going to fit together, just coming up with some toys that we can toss down and let the characters figure out what to do with them and let them follow those, and some guidance that we can give in the form of some skill checks to see kind of where where these leads take them. So we've got 3 locations, which is good because we have 3 nodes. And so we have our Green Witch, we have the inn, and we have the fair. So let's start with our witch. And so let's just start over here. So we'll say the witch. Okay. And let's say, we don't need to address what they discovered there, because they're going to get, that same kind of information, that maybe it was an Oni, maybe it was some other creature. She might give them some ideas of what it could be. She's a good pointer to use to kind of lead them to support our witness who saw the transformation, maybe clear up some misunderstandings about that, really make sure that they're on the right track. So we have a knowledgeable character that can give some clues, a Van Helsing-like character in terms of, if you've read like Dracula, it can be a little bit of a pointer, a little bit of a mentor, that kind of deal. But now we're coming up with other leads, things that the characters might discover here while at the witches that lead to other elements of the mystery. So the first thing that I was thinking was, polymorph is a spell. It leaves a magical signature, which means that detect magic would be really useful in identifying who is, who's pretending to be somebody that they're not, right? So we don't want to assume that the characters are going to have detect magic, although you would know better about your characters. So maybe she could provide a charm. And when I say charm, I'm actually thinking more of like a bracelet or a bauble of some kind. So we'll say an amulet of detect magic. And I just think that maybe it lets them cast detect magic at will, and that getting the witch to give them that is relatively difficult. It's a DC 15. That's a DC 15. And this is a lead to the Oni. Okay, that's a lead to our solution. So that doesn't lead to one of the other investigative points. It leads to the actual climax. Hence why it is so difficult to discover right out the gate. Next, I was thinking that, she might be able to give information about a creature like this. She might not know that it's an Oni right out the gate, although maybe she might, depending on the description the characters give her. But maybe she would reveal to them that creatures like this, that transform, that hide as people and transform, are likely to hunt the same grounds for a few nights in a row until their prey sort of disperses, right? So maybe we're going to say prowl same grounds. And that's a clue to go check out the fair. And so we're going to say that's a DC 10. And we're just going to say fair, because we kind of already have our lead to pattern down here. We don't need to keep writing it out, taking up space. And we just need one other kind of clue to find here. We don't need a whole bunch. And this one's going to be, this is going to be our freebie, because we want them to come here and learn something that leads them somewhere else. We don't want this to feel like a dead end because they had a series of bad dice rolls. So let's say that let's say that she lives in the community, and she's lived in the community for a long time. We already know she lives in the community, but she's lived in here a long time. She could probably tell the characters for free that that there were no murders on the fair during the fair the year before when they came through, and there was no murders going on prior to the fair's arrival, and so it needs to be newcomers. It must be new people, she suggests, that are the culprits. So let's say newcomer and culprits. And that we're going to say is free. And we'll also say that that leads to the inn, because that's where the newcomers are staying, right? Although the players might take that and say, well, we should check out the fair. And that's okay. That's okay, because we can address that later. But that potentially leads to the inn, and that's a little bit of freebie information that she can provide. Cool. So now you'll notice we got 3 clues here, and one leads to the solution, and the other 2 lead to the other investigative nodes that we have. So let's go ahead and start working on them, and we'll say, let's say the fair is next. Let's say fair. Okay, and let's just put a little line here so we divide. A little line there as well, so we know that there's a separation. Okay, and so, well, the first thing is we don't want to create red herrings. I know that sound is kind of counter, right? Because like in a good mystery, there are red herrings in there. I mean, you read Agatha Christie, there's red herrings all over the place, and frankly, she's my spirit guide when it comes to when it comes to writing mysteries, metaphorically. My spirit guide. Um, big Agatha Christie fan. But what? But we don't want to do red herrings in this because, frankly, the players are going to come up with their own red herrings. They're going to come. They're going to go down avenues that we never imagined, and they're going to run themselves in circles. We don't need to make that harder on them. So instead of saying, "Oh yeah, there are new performers at the fair this year. Ooh, maybe they're it," knowing full well that's not the solution. Instead of sending our characters down that rabbit hole and confusing them and setting them up to fail, we're going to set them up for success. And we're going to say that there were no new members. Okay. And we're going to say that that one is a DC 10, because even though they've been hired by the leader of the fair, um, maybe or hired by the fair manager, maybe fair manager is trying. Well, the fair manager is trying to get them to prove their innocence. He doesn't want the characters digging into the fair. He wants them investigating elsewhere, and so he might be a little stonewalled about, um, the characters poking around at the fair, suggesting that maybe somebody there had something to do with it. And so he would probably direct them to go check the inn where anybody else who's new to town would be staying. All right. That being said, he is going to be helpful because he hired them. So he wants to help them find who he believes to be the real killers or the real killer. And so he might provide some other information. Things like, maybe, having been here, he knows this is the kind of town where people lock their doors at night. And so that the fact that the door was unlocked and there was no forced entry means that maybe magic was used to get inside. And so we might say magic needed for locks. And, well, we already have a resident. We'll make this free. We'll make this the free one. We already have a resident magic expert, so maybe that's the witch. All right, and we'll say witch. That might prompt the characters to go seek her out for more information about what kind of creature might have the kind of magic needed to get inside without a key. Onis, for example, have gaseous form and charm person. They could have used any of those to get in there. And so you'll notice that it points back because we don't want to make the assumption that they go to the witch first. We've got a free lead to the fair, right? They may go to the fair first and not have thought about going to seek out the witch or any of that kind of information. So we've got multiple clues here that lead back to each node. All right, so that's our 3, or that's 2. Let's get our third. Let's pull the fortune teller into this. Yeah, let's say that they had a vision of the killer polymorphed as a traveler visiting the town. And we can role play it as a very kind of mystic, kind of almost that like tropey thing where the psychic busts into the investigation and reveals a clue delivered to them through clairvoyance. That might pop up in any kind of pulpy sort of mystery. Because that could be fun, because that could be a real thing in this world. Divination is a real thing. So we can make it very serious or we make it very silly, but either way, I think it's a cool thing. So vision of Oni as traveler. Okay, and that could be a DC 15, and that leads to the Oni. All right, because we can be as clear or as vague with that as we want, depending on when the characters discover this clue, right? If they come across it right away, then, well, then they have a vision of this transformation. It's got to be one of the travelers visiting the town, but we don't necessarily give away the exact identity. We give clues and hints as to who it might be, but we don't get a clear image. But if it's like the last clue that they find, well, then maybe the uh, the fortune teller has a clear vision of a beard or a scar or a birthmark or some very unique identifying thing that the characters can go investigate. Um, so that gives us our 3 here. All right, and then let's hit the inn, our last investigative location. Um, a simple thing to find here again would be ticket stubs to the fair. So we can find fair ticket stubs. And these might be on the night or nights of the murder or murderers, because we'll talk about why there might be more than one. And we'll make these we'll make these free. We can give them a low DC if we wanted to, but we'll say free, and we'll say they go to the fair, because that's kind of our central first easy location, the obvious one, right? And then let's see here. Maybe to assist itself, because Onis do crave magical items. If you read their description in the monster manual, they talk about that they will sometimes do favors in exchange for magic, because they crave magic. So maybe this one is using scrolls of Hunter's Mark to help it kind of mark its victim during the day and then track them back to where they live at night. And so let's say Hunter's Mark scroll. Again, that's a magical clue for why they might need that. And let's say that's, let's say it's DC 10 to find it, and it goes to the witch. It suggests that there's more magic at play, and it keeps painting this picture. And again, with all these little clues, they lead back to the witch. These might be cumulative. They might keep coming back to the witch, refining this vision, and that might be enough for her to go, I know what it is. It's an Oni. And it might even help them figure out who of the people in town, of the newcomers, is the Oni in disguise. You can play it out that way. It just depends on what avenues your players take. But we've given ourselves a number of tools here that we can kind of leverage to make our players feel like they're on the right track, and get them to that aha moment, that realization that gives them the ultimate satisfaction of solving this mystery without just going, and here's the answer. They're finding bits and pieces. So last, again, I'm coming back to the blood on this one, right? Like, it's a gory freaking thing. And so we can say that maybe there's a little bit of blood that they only clean the sheets or what have you, or clean themselves up, but there was just a little bit that soaked into the mattress. So let's say blood on mattress, and DC 15, and it's the Oni, because it would be on the Oni's mattress only, and maybe it's just a little bit of blood, which is why it requires so much effort to find it. But it would identify, the person sleeping in that bed is the killer. That's who it is. Now they can go confront them. And in the confrontation, the Oni will reveal itself. You don't need to role play this as the Oni tries to bluff their way through it. Maybe they reveal themselves and decide that the characters have to die, because they know it's secret. They're a threat to it. So that brings us then to the Oni. Now, the Oni is our final node here, right? And so it does not need clues that lead it to the other places, because it is the solution, is our climax here, right? It is our decision point of whether or not the characters will be able to stop the killings by destroying the Oni. And so this is a confrontation, and fight. You can say it's the death or the Oni tries to flee. I'm going to say Oni flees at half. And if it gets away, and I mean half hit points, and if it manages to get away, well, then it can come back and try to kill the characters one at a time during the course of whatever other their next adventure is. It can appear at night, interrupting long rests and hunting them, haunting their dreams. But even if it doesn't, trying to run away could trigger a tense chase sequence through the village. Again, building up that tension and ratcheting up that climactic moment as there's this showdown between the characters and this very dangerous Oni. This is our core structure here, right? So we've got our 5 nodes, our first crime scene, our 3 investigated areas with their clues, and our final confrontation and solution. But sometimes, your characters might miss stuff that's in here. And while there's plenty of redundancy to get them from point A to point B and kind of figure some of this stuff out, um, there, there may you may have a need for multiple nodes. So I also like to come up with floater nodes, things that could happen that will provide them the opportunity for finding more clues. So the first one that comes to me is let's make a note here. Let's say we're going to say floating nodes. Okay. And the first one is a new murder. Okay. And we'll say same as first. Cool. So, we just repeat crime scene number 1 with a new murder. The next night, somebody else is killed. That kind of thing. And then we can spice it up a little bit by saying that the third murder, a PC is attacked at night. Okay, and so it has ends up with the same kind of clues for all the different murders here. But with the PC being attacked, well, now they become the witness. They see what happened, and hopefully they survive it, right? So they have some. They might even get the chance to solve and end the engagement right then and there. Although the Oni would try to flee once it's outnumbered. And we might make a note of that. We'll say Oni flees when outnumbered. Okay, and then we really only need one other potential floater. And the idea here is you pick whichever one best kind of fits the moment, what's in terms of what's happening with the players and what they've got going on, or the characters and what they have going on. And so we're going to say that this one is an Oni ambush. And that the players get attacked by the Oni, knowing that they're getting too close to it. And so it gets proactive and tries to take them out. And so the first clue that this would provide would be the Oni itself. Let's say Oni sighting. And that is free. They now know that it's an Oni, although they don't actually know who the Oni is. Next, we're going to say the Oni has a very characteristic weapon. It uses a glaive. So we're going to say the glaive. And that would lead to the inn. We're going to say that's probably a DC 10 for them to remember that one of the travelers uses a glaive. That actually leads to the Oni, not to the inn. It leads to the solution. Okay. Then we're going to say, the magic was used in the combat. So magic used. Again, the kinds of spells. We're gonna say we give this another DC 10. We don't need this one to be difficult because it's a floater. It's there to get the characters back on the right track if they miss it. We'll say this goes back to the witch, most likely. And then we could do, instead of another fair stub, we can do a fair flyer. Dropped during the attack. DC 10 again. And that's going to be goes to the fair. And, things like, it's not that they need a DC 10 to spot it. You might make a perception check, and if they don't get a 10, it's not that they just didn't see it. It's that perhaps the Oni didn't drop it in that case. Think of some of these sometimes as luck checks, where you're picking an appropriate skill to get the characters to notice something in particular or discover something. And if they fail, it's not that the characters did notice it, it's that it wasn't there, in the first place. And so this kind of gives a little bit of variability to the clues as they kind of are littered about. And it also gives you kind of a tool to invent new clues as you go through, because there's nothing wrong with, in the moment, coming up with something that's cool, that the characters try to do something that you hadn't thought of, and you want to reward them by offering them a clue that wasn't there in the original design, but makes total sense. We've got all of this, and now all we need is our resolution, and that's pretty straightforward. The fair manager. Let's put our res here. Resolution, and it's pretty simple. Fair manager pays up. Pays up. PCs are toast of the town. So, not necessarily a parade, if you will, or anything like that. But, the characters have ended the murders. And so now they're heroes here locally. People are, maybe they buy them drinks. Maybe there is a small celebration held, that kind of deal. But this is a small town, and they are no longer under threat, and it's because of the players, and we want them to feel that appreciation. But that brings us then to the Oni itself. So the Oni, it's either defeated or it gets away. And if that's the case, I think it's best for it to return to hunt PCs. Much better if it becomes a vengeful Oni coming back to wreak havoc and interrupt long rests and be a continuing problem until the players can deal with it, until the characters can deal with it once and for all. And really, that's all there is to it. We have a fully playable adventure that has all the elements of a solid story, from our exposition, our inciting incident, to our rising action, to our climax, and our resolution. And so we've got a good story, we've got tons of clues, and we've given ourselves plenty of little leverage points to help subtly, guide the characters through this mystery so they can have that satisfying aha moment. And that's really what we're after with the mystery, is that moment when the players realize that they know the solution and are so proud of themselves. It's the best feeling in the world for them, and it's a really cool feeling for you as a DM. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you never miss a video. And if you enjoy my adventures, come play one with me. Find me at startplaying.games/GM/rjcurrer. Join one of my ongoing campaigns or one of my upcoming one-shots and get in the game with me. I would love to meet all of you at one of my tables. Until that time, I'll see you here.